All right, let's just jump right in. You know the scene, right? It's midnight, December 31st. The sky is just exploding with fireworks. Everyone's screaming and hugging, making all these big promises for the new year. But at that very same moment, someone else is just asleep. No countdown, no fancy drinks. For them, it's just another Tuesday night. So you've got this wild contrast, right? On one hand, this massive shared experience. The fireworks, the crowds, the big countdown. It's this collective ritual of hope. But then, on the other side, it's a completely different reality. It's the quiet of just another night, maybe the comfort of a familiar show on TV, that same sense of peace you get on any other weekend. And these two things are happening at the exact same time. So what is going on in the minds of the people who choose that quiet path? What's the deal there? I mean, seriously, what kind of mind looks at one of the biggest parties on the entire planet and just feels nothing special? Now, this isn't about being a killjoy or a downer, not at all. It's actually about a whole different kind of psychology, a really different relationship with time and our own emotions. And that is exactly what we're going to get into today. Okay, so let's start with the first group of people. And this is key. They aren't just ignoring the night. No, they are actively choosing calm over all that chaos. This is not an accident. It's not a mistake. It is a very deliberate act of, well, psychological preservation. So the core idea here is something called emotional regulation. And what's so fascinating about this is how it completely reframes the whole thing. See, instead of looking at it like a failure to get excited, you can see it as a success in managing your own energy. Think of it like a battery. These folks aren't trying to drain it all on one big emotional high. They're trying to preserve that charge, that sense of inner calm. And this really just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? It's this deep understanding that joy doesn't have to be loud or dramatic to actually be real. A quiet evening, that feeling of peace, for some people, that is the celebration. It's about choosing enough in a world that is always, always screaming for more. And a lot of the time, we're talking about the introverted observer. You know, for them, it has nothing to do with disliking people. It's literally about how their brain is wired to process stimulation. A huge, loud, crowded New Year's party, that's not joy. That's just pure sensory overload. For them, reflection happens all the time, on the inside. It doesn't just switch on at midnight because a clock says so. So treating the night as just another night, it isn't some act of rebellion. It's just alignment. It's their outside world finally matching their inner one. All right, but that's only one side of the coin. Let's shift gears a bit, because for some people, this choice isn't about preserving calm at all. It's about surviving the sheer weight of the year they just endured. You know, when the year leaves you with scars, forcing yourself to celebrate just feels, well, it feels wrong. And you can really break this weight down into three different kinds. First up, you have the exhausted. These are the people whose brains have been in survival mode for so long that all the days just blur together. Then you've got the lonely. And for them, New Year's Eve feels less like a celebration and more like a spotlight on their isolation. And finally, the wounded. The ones who are still carrying the raw pain of what the last year took away. So for the lonely, New Year's Eve is basically the Super Bowl of social comparison. Every single photo, every Instagram story, every countdown you see seems to just scream, look, everyone else is surrounded by people who love them. And that creates this really painful feeling, a social confirmation of their absence. It's brutal. So what do? They withdraw. They tell themselves it's just another day. And that becomes a survival strategy, you know, a way to minimize the emotional damage. And then you have the wounded, the people who lost a job or a relationship, maybe even a loved one. For them, the whole idea of popping confetti and celebrating can feel like a betrayal of their own pain. And this is so, so important to remember. Healing doesn't follow a schedule. It doesn't care about the date on a calendar. Forcing yourself to feel hopeful can just feel dishonest. So for them, treating New Year's like any other day is their way of being true to their own journey. It's how they keep walking forward, step by step, without needing any applause. So when you look at it all together, it becomes really clear. It's these incredibly powerful forces, that deep exhaustion, that sharp isolation, and that heavy pain that are driving so many people to just keep on going. Each one of these things adds a huge emotional weight, and that makes it almost impossible to jump into some kind of forced happy reset. And look, it's not because they're ungrateful or bitter or anything like that. It's just their minds and hearts are simply too heavy to lift. Okay, so this brings us to the final and maybe most important piece of the puzzle. We're going to reframe this entire behavior. Because what if? What if treating New Year's Eve like just another day isn't a weakness at all? What if it's actually a quiet kind of strength? What if it's an act of honesty? Just look at this contrast. On one side, you have what society expects, this big public reset button, this performance of hope, this shared meaning that we're all supposed to feel at once. But the honest-to-God reality for so many people is just quiet continuation. It's private growth that happens slowly, bit by bit. It's an individual honesty about where you actually are in your life. These are the folks who don't trust a reset button that you didn't have to earn, and they're not going to outsource the meaning of their life to a page on a calendar. And really, if you take one thing away from this, let it be this. When the whole world is demanding that you feel joy on command, choosing neutrality, just letting the night pass, can be an incredible act of psychological integrity. We often mistake that kind of honesty for coldness, but it's not. It's about refusing to perform an emotion you just don't feel. And funnily enough, these are often the people who make the biggest changes in their lives. They just do it quietly, without a big announcement. So in the end, maybe the real question isn't whether you celebrate or not. Maybe the real question we should be asking ourselves is this: do you need all that noise to feel alive? Or do you trust the quiet enough to actually grow inside of it? Because somewhere in that space between the fireworks and the silence, well, that's where most of us really live our lives. Definitely something to think about.